Lyra had never meant to spill blood. Not like this. She was just an Omega, a servant meant to clean floors, fetch water, bow her head and remain invisible. But when the Alpha King's men stormed her village at dawn, hunting rebels and silencing anyone who dared resist their rule, fate shoved her into the fire. She had been in the woods carrying scraps of food for her younger brother, hiding in a hollow tree. When they found her, the commander accused her of being a rebel's kin, dragged her into the snow and pressed a blade to her throat. Something inside her snapped. She didn't remember the exact moment she turned on them, only the blur of steel flashing, the scream torn from her lungs, the crack of bones under her fists. She moved like someone possessed, like her blood itself carried a rage she had never known. One by one the Alpha King's warriors fell. Wolves in armor brought low by a ragged Omega girl who should have cowered. When her vision cleared, the snow was painted crimson. Half of them lay dead, their lifeless eyes wide with disbelief. She staggered, chest heaving, daggers slick in her trembling grip. The survivors circled her with snarls of outrage and fear, blades raised but hesitant. Then everything stilled. Bootsteps crunched across the snow. The remaining warriors dropped their gazes, shoulders bowing beneath the crushing weight of a presence that made the air itself feel heavier. King Aldrich. The Alpha King moved through the carnage like a storm wrapped in human form. Broad-shouldered, clad in black fur and steel, his dark hair dusted with frost, he was more shadow than man, his golden eyes glowing with the hunger of a predator. Power rolled off him in waves so strong Lyra's knees almost buckled. Her grip on the dagger faltered. His gaze found her, Omega drenched in blood, trembling but unbroken. And for one terrible heartbeat she thought he'd give the order to kill her where she stood. But instead, his growl cut through the silence, low and lethal. Clean her and bring her to me. Her dagger slipped from numb fingers. The soldiers surged forward, iron chains clinking as they shackled her wrists and ankles. She fought, teeth bared, but exhaustion had hollowed her strength. The bite of steel dragged her to her knees as snowflakes melted into her fevered skin. They hauled her through the forest toward the looming fortress carved into the mountainside. Torches blazed against stone walls, shadows of wolves dancing across the great gate. Every step echoed with her chains, every heartbeat hammering with dread. At last they flung her onto the cold marble floor of the Alpha King's great hall. Firelight flickered across vaulted ceilings, banners of conquered clans hanging like trophies. Warriors lined the room, watching in silence. And there he was. King Aldrich sat on the throne, a predator at rest, his golden eyes fixed on her. He leaned forward slightly, studying her as if she were not a girl in rags, but something dangerous, something unknown. The hall seemed to vanish, leaving only his gaze, piercing her soul, and the sound of her own ragged breathing. Chains biting into her wrists, Lyra lifted her chin, refusing to look away. Aldrich's lips curved, not into a smile but something darker. His voice was a blade sliding between her ribs as he spoke. "Tell me, little wolf, what are you?" The throne room was silent, except for the faint drip of blood from Lyra's chained wrists. She stood defiantly, hair wild, her torn clothes still marked with the stains of Aldrich's fallen men. The grand hall of obsidian stone seemed to close in on her, filled with the sharp gazes of courtiers, guards, and elders. Every soul present expected the same outcome, death. But Aldrich, the Alpha King, sat unmoving on his throne, carved from black iron and wolf bone. His golden eyes studied her like a predator weighing his prey. For a moment, the silence was unbearable, and then his voice rumbled across the chamber, low and dangerous. "Who are you? And how did a nameless Omega tear through my finest warriors?" The word struck the hall like a thunderclap. Omegas were supposed to be weak, subservient, shadows in the grand order of wolves. Yet here she stood, bloodied, unbowed, her scent thick with defiance. Lyra met his gaze without flinching. Her pulse raced, but her chin lifted. "I'll tell you nothing. Not to you, not to anyone." Gasps erupted from the court. One of the advisors stepped forward, fury in his voice. "Your Majesty, she insults the crown. Allow me to rip the truth from her." Aldrich silenced him with a flick of his hand, his attention never leaving Lyra. A slow, dangerous smile tugged at his mouth. It unsettled her more than his anger ever could. "You don't bow," he said softly as though amused. "You don't tremble. Every other Omega in my kingdom would be groveling at my feet." Lyra's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Maybe you've never met one who had nothing left to lose." His smirk faltered just for an instant. Something flickered in his golden eyes. Recognition, curiosity, perhaps even respect. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Then tell me, little wolf, what is it you've already lost? Lyra's throat tightened. Memories threatened to surface. Her village aflame, the scent of iron and smoke, the cries of her people silenced by soldiers' blades. His soldiers. She swallowed them back, refusing to give him that piece of her. Enough to know I'll never serve a king. Another wave of shock rippled through the chamber. To defy Aldrich so openly was to sign one's death sentence. Elders whispered of madness. Warriors rested their hands on their blades, waiting for the order to strike her down. But Aldrich did not roar. He did not rage. Instead, he rose from his throne, descending the steps with the slow certainty of a wolf closing on its prey. He circled her, the chains rattling as guards shoved her to her knees. Still she refused to lower her head. When he finally stopped before her, the room holding its breath, he spoke words no one expected. "You'll fight for me now." The silence shattered into chaos. Advisors shouted. Nobles protested. Warriors growled their disbelief. Lyra's breath caught, her heart thundering in her chest. She had expected execution, not this. His command was worse than death. It was a trap, a leash dressed as a bargain. But Aldrich only smirked at the uproar around him, his golden eyes gleaming with something dark and dangerous. His hand brushed her chin, tilting her face toward his. "Defy me again and I'll break you. But fight for me and perhaps you'll discover why fate brought you here." The weight of Aldrich's words still hung in the air as the guards dragged Lyra from the throne room. His hand had lingered on her chin for only a heartbeat, yet the burn of it remained, an unspoken mark of possession she could not scrub away. The courtiers' whispers echoed in the vaulted halls. Fear, outrage, disbelief. An Omega spared, an Omega commanded to fight for the king. The stone corridors of the palace were colder than the snow outside, lined with wolf-bone torches that crackled like the growls of restless spirits. The guards shoved her down a winding stairwell, deeper and deeper, until the air grew damp and metallic. The dungeon. Her chains rattled with every step. They threw her into a narrow cell of iron bars. The stench of moss and rust choked her lungs. When the door clanged shut, silence followed, except for the steady rhythm of another's breathing. Her gaze snapped to the corner. A figure sat slumped in the shadows, shackled to the wall. His hair was silvered at the temples, his once proud posture broken by years of confinement. Yet his eyes gleamed sharp and alive when they met hers. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice quiet but steady. "Not you." Lyra stiffened, pressing her back to the wall. "And what would you know of me?" The man's smile was weary, almost tragic. "Enough to know you are not what you pretend to be." Her pulse quickened. "I'm an Omega, that's all." He laughed low and bitter. "If that were true, half the palace guards would still be alive tonight. Tell me, girl, do you even know the blood that runs through your veins?" The chains dug into her wrists as she clenched her fists. "I don't need to know. All I need is freedom." "Freedom?" The prisoner's voice softened, almost pitying. "Child, your freedom died the moment the Alpha King laid eyes on you." The truth of it chilled her more than the damp air. She turned away, unwilling to let him see her fear. Yet something in his voice gnawed at her, like a key rattling against a lock she had never known was there. The hours bled into one another, the silence heavy except for the drip of water on stone. Then, as the torches dimmed and the guard's footsteps faded above, the man leaned closer. His voice was barely a whisper. "They call you Lyra now, but that is not the name you were born with." Her heart lurched. She whipped toward him, breath catching in her throat. "What did you just say?" His eyes burned with a knowing fire. Inch by inch, he dragged himself closer, the chains scraping stone. When his lips were near her ear, he spoke the name. "Your true name is Arya." The syllable struck her like a blade through the ribs. Familiar. Forbidden. A word she thought erased from history. Arya. The forbidden name hung between them, ringing in her skull like a bell that summoned ghosts. Lyra's breath came shallow, her fingers trembling despite the chains. She wanted to demand answers, to seize the prisoner by the throat and force truth from him. But before she could speak, the heavy door of the dungeon creaked open. A guard stepped in, torchlight spilling across the damp floor. "The king summons her." Chains clinked as Lyra was dragged out. She glanced back at the prisoner, his expression a storm of urgency and sorrow, but he said nothing more. Only his eyes followed her, heavy with secrets she was not ready to bear. The palace corridors swallowed her once again, but this time she sensed a presence above her, unseen yet suffocating. From a balcony high in the throne hall, Aldrich leaned in the shadows, watching as she was escorted toward the training grounds. His eyes never wavered, sharp as a blade, testing its prey. To the courtiers he was silent as stone, but within he studied her like a riddle he intended to solve or break. As Lyra was led through the marble corridors, she became acutely aware of the weight pressing down upon her shoulders. It wasn't merely physical, the chains that bound her wrists, though those were heavy enough. It was something far more profound, a pressure that seemed to emanate from the very walls of this fortress, from the golden eyes that followed her every step, from the prophecy she didn't understand and couldn't escape. The dungeon master, an old wolf named Thorian with silver streaking through his beard, had once told her in whispered tones that the greatest prisons were not made of iron or stone. They were woven from destiny itself, invisible chains that bound a person to their fate more securely than any blacksmith's work ever could. She hadn't believed him then. But now, walking these corridors as if in a dream, she was beginning to understand. The arena loomed ahead. She could smell the sand, the blood of 1,000 battles, the anticipation of the crowds who gathered there. Warriors and nobles alike thirsted for spectacle, for the confirmation that their world still operated under the rules they understood. An Omega fighting a warrior? Impossible. An Omega standing before their king with defiance burning in her eyes? Heresy. And yet Lyra found herself walking toward it all without flinching. Perhaps it was resignation. Perhaps it was something else, something that whispered that this was exactly where she was meant to be, that every step from the moment she'd killed those soldiers in the snow had led her inexorably to this place, this moment, this man. The gates of the arena groaned open. Torches flared, casting a circle of firelight across the sand. Warriors, nobles, and courtiers gathered, murmuring with restless anticipation. Lyra was shoved forward, chains removed, a sword shoved into her hand. At the far end of the circle stood a man as massive as a bear, scars carved into his chest like trophies of old wars. His name was Garen, Aldrich's fiercest commander. The herald's voice rang out across the arena. The king commands trial by combat. Lyra's blood chilled, but fire sparked beneath her ribs. She would not bow. She would not bleed for their amusement. If they wanted proof of her strength, they would choke on it. The fight began with Garen's roar. He lunged, blade swinging like a storm. Lyra ducked, the force of his strike rattling her bones. Again and again he struck. Each blow meant to crush, but Lyra moved like lightning. The Omega's grace sharpened into predatory precision. Gasps rose as she twisted, parried, and in one brutal moment drove her blade through his thigh. Garen howled, collapsing to one knee. Lyra's instincts surged. She wrenched his own weapon from his grasp and with a brutal arc, slammed the hilt into his skull. He hit the ground, unmoving. The arena fell silent. An Omega had beaten Aldrich's best. Lyra stood over the fallen warrior, chest heaving, blood speckling her face. She looked up and found Aldrich descending from his balcony, his cloak trailing like shadowed wings. The crowd parted as he entered the circle. His smirk was cold, dangerous, carved for her alone. He drew his sword, the steel gleaming under firelight. He leveled the blade at her throat and said, voice deep and final, "Now you fight me." The firelight of the arena danced across Aldrich's blade as it hovered at Lyra's throat. His smirk lingered, not playful, but dangerous, as though daring her to defy him before the eyes of his entire court. Lyra's grip on her weapon tightened. The crowd leaned forward, every soul hungry for blood. The whispers rose like snakes in the dust. An Omega had failed Garen, and now she would be slaughtered for her arrogance. "Fight me," Aldrich growled, circling her with deliberate slowness. "Show me if your fury is more than a fluke." Her chest heaved, muscles aching from the duel she'd already endured. But she lifted her blade. "You want to fight, King?" Her voice cut sharper than steel. "Then bleed with me." Their clash erupted in a storm of sparks. His strikes were merciless, measured to break rather than merely wound. She parried, the force rattling through her bones, but refused to yield. Each movement was a dance of defiance. Her body a blur against the crushing weight of his power. Every swing of his sword felt like the weight of a kingdom. Yet she matched him step for step, breath for breath. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she forced him back a pace, her blade sliding perilously close to his chest. For an instant, their eyes locked mid-strike, his dark assessing, laced with something more dangerous than rage. Hers burning with rebellion and a flicker of fear she refused to show. Steel rang, sand sprayed, the scent of sweat and blood thickened the air. And then with a cry born of desperation, Lyra twisted, ducked beneath his guard, and drove her sword upward, its edge biting close to his throat. The court erupted, half in horror, half in awe. The king, the unbreakable alpha, the iron hand of the realm, was a breath away from defeat at the hands of a chained Omega. Her heart thundered in her chest. Victory tasted sharp on her tongue. One strike and she could end him. One strike and her chains would be broken forever. But then his hand shot up faster than her eyes could follow, clamping around her wrist. His sword clattered to the ground, yet his gaze never wavered. Aldrich's voice dropped to a growl that silenced the roaring arena. Do it. Strike me down. Lyra froze, her blade trembling inches from his throat. His smirk was gone now, replaced with something darker, a glimmer of grim knowing. Kill me, he whispered, his voice a low command. But if you do, you will never learn the truth of your bloodline. The words hit her harder than any blade could. Bloodline. The prisoner's whisper, Arya, echoed in her skull. A truth buried in shadow, a secret that chained her fate to his. The blade quivered in her grip as the court held its breath, watching. Lyra's heart pounded as she realized, striking him might free her, but sparing him could unlock the answers she had hunted all her life. And Aldrich's piercing eyes said only one thing. Choose. The blade still quivered in Lyra's grasp. The king's words coiled around her, venomous and binding. You'll never know the truth of your bloodline. For one breathless moment she considered it, driving her weapon through his throat and letting the sand of the arena drink his blood. But then, with a defiance sharper than steel, she lowered the blade. Gasps broke out around them, outrage and disbelief mixing in the crowd. Aldrich straightened, slow and deliberate, his hand still locked around her wrist as if reminding her who truly held power. But his smirk returned, dangerous and unreadable. She spares me, he declared, voice booming across the Colosseum, not out of mercy but out of wisdom. The court erupted into chaos. Some howled that she bewitched him, others insisting she should be executed for the insult of raising steel against their king. Yet Aldrich silenced them with a single raised hand. His eyes lingered on Lyra like a brand, as though claiming her defiance as his possession. That night the palace whispered. Lyra was caged again, this time in golden chambers rather than iron bars. The walls were gilded, the bed draped in velvet, but she felt no less imprisoned. Freedom was a blade's edge she had not taken. And the whispers spread. Nobles gathered in shadowed corridors, their voices sharp as daggers. She is dangerous. Did you see her strength? An Omega defeating Garen. Blasphemy. The king hesitates. She clouds his judgment. She must die before she unravels everything. Lyra, pacing her chambers, felt the weight of their hatred pressing in. The palace was not her cage. It was her gallows. That night she couldn't sleep. The air felt wrong, heavy, as though unseen eyes pressed on her from the corners of the chamber. She rose quietly, bare feet whispering across the cold floor, and pressed her ear against the door. 2 guards lingered outside, their voices low and conspiratorial, bled into her ears. Orders came tonight, one muttered. From whom? The council. She dies before the moon sets. The king won't even know who slit her throat. Her blood chilled, her heart hammering against her ribs. Assassination not by enemies but by his own men. She stepped back silently, gaze darting to the shadow near her bed, where her captors had left a ceremonial blade. Not enough to win freedom but enough to make someone bleed. The door creaked. A figure entered, one of her guards. His movements were too careful, too deliberate. He closed the door softly behind him, steel glinting in his hand. Lyra's breath froze. Her body tensed, instinct igniting like wildfire. The guard's voice was low, almost apologetic. Forgive me, Omega. I have no choice. Orders from within the council. Your death is the key to keeping the kingdom intact. Her heart pounded as the truth cracked open. This was not just paranoia. Someone inside Aldrich's own circle wanted her gone. In a blur, she lunged and caught his wrist mid-strike. The dagger stopped inches from her throat, their eyes locked, both trembling with effort as she hissed. Tell me who sent you. The guard's face twisted, torn between fear and duty. His silence was her answer until the blade slipped closer. The assassin's blade hovered a hair's breadth from Lyra's throat, her muscles screamed as she fought his weight, wrists trembling against the strength of a man twice her size. Tell me who sent you, she snarled, her voice low, or I swear I'll make this last. The guard's jaw tightened, sweat sliding down his temple. His silence was louder than any confession. With a sudden twist, he forced the dagger closer, its tip biting into her skin. Heat flared, blood welled, sharp and bright. And then the door slammed open. A blur of power swept through the room. Chains of shadow and flame seemed to curl around the intruder's body, the unmistakable presence of Aldrich, the Alpha King. His eyes were molten gold and fury thundered in his every step. The assassin's hand jerked as if possessed, his blade clattering to the floor. Lyra staggered back, clutching her throat, but Aldrich caught her before she fell. For one breath, their faces were too close. His hand steadying her waist, his gaze burning like fire. Then he released her, turning his wrath on the guard. "You dare raise steel against what is mine?" The courtly mask Lyra had seen him wear in the arena was gone. This was raw, unchained dominance the Alpha King unleashed. With one motion, Aldrich lifted the traitor off the ground by his throat. The man gasped, kicking, eyes bulging. "Name the hand that moved you." Aldrich growled, voice like stone grinding against stone. The guard croaked, shaking his head, tears streaking down his face. "I cannot. They'll." His neck snapped before he could finish. Aldrich let the corpse fall like a broken doll. The room smelled of blood and smoke, though no fire burned. Lyra's chest heaved as she pressed her hand against the shallow cut at her throat. "You should have let him speak," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "I could have had a name. You question my judgment." Aldrich turned on her, golden eyes searing into hers. He would have lied or died slower. "The council festers with vipers. I'll root them out my way." Their stares clashed, hers defiant, his unreadable. For the first time, she sensed something beneath his fury. Not just anger, not just possession, but protection. An interest far more dangerous than hatred. And she hated that a part of her didn't hate it. But she had secrets of her own, ones she could never let him discover. The prisoner's whispered words still echoed in her mind. Her true name gnawing at her. Aldrich wanted loyalty, but if he knew who she truly was, he might destroy her before she could understand her own bloodline. She drew herself up, masking the storm within. "Keep your cord in check, King. I don't need saving." His lips curved, dangerous and knowing. "And yet you bleed. Tell me, Lyra, what truth do you hide that makes them fear you more than me?" She said nothing. Silence was her shield. But the moment was shattered by the distant blast of horns. The palace trembled. The scent of smoke rolled in, not from torches but from fire-burning stone. A guard burst through the door, panting, his armor scorched. "My king, the walls are breached. Wolves from the northern clans are inside." Aldrich's head snapped toward the sound, his expression darkening to something lethal. "Who dares?" The guard swallowed, his eyes flicking in terror towards Lyra. "The rival Alpha. He demands the girl. He wants her alive." Dear listener, if this tale has ignited something within your soul, if you felt every heartbeat of defiance alongside Lyra as she stood before the mighty Alpha King, then you simply cannot stop here. The truth of her bloodline is beginning to unravel, whispers of a forbidden name echo through the dungeon walls, and the destiny she never asked for is closing around her like chains of starlight. Subscribe now because the next chapter will shatter everything you thought you understood. A trial by combat awaits, fire and fury unleashed in the arena, a battle that will prove whether Lyra is merely a weapon or something far more dangerous. The Alpha King himself will descend into the sand, and what happens between them will determine the fate of kingdoms. The kiss that changes everything is coming, and you won't want to miss a single breathtaking moment of it. Hit that subscribe button and journey with us into the storm. Your adventure continues, but only if you're brave enough to follow. Lyra's heart stopped. The words coiled around her like chains from the burning shadows of the courtyard below. A monstrous figure stepped into view, his claws dripping, his howl shaking the palace walls. His voice carried across the firelit night. "Hand over the Omega, or I will tear this kingdom apart, stone by stone." The rival Alpha's howl still echoed off the burning palace walls as silence gripped the hall. Even the air seemed to freeze, thick with smoke and dread. Lyra's pulse throbbed in her throat, every beat reminding her she was the reason fire now licked at Aldrich's kingdom. Aldrich stood at the shattered balcony, his golden eyes narrowing as he stared down at the beast of a man below. His voice, cold and cutting, carried over the chaos. "You dare breach my gates and demand what is mine." The rival Alpha laughed, a sound as guttural as gravel grinding against steel. He was massive, draped in furs, scars slashing across his body like trophies. His soldiers stood like a tide of shadows behind him. When he spoke again, the words were for the whole court to hear. "She belongs to me. Her blood is bound to my line. Return her and I will spare your throne." Gasps rippled through the watching nobles. All eyes flicked toward Lyra, shackled, bruised, throat marked by near death, yet standing tall. Aldrich turned, gaze burning into her. For one brief second she thought she saw something flicker there. Not fear, not anger, something darker. Possession. He stepped closer, his voice low but lethal. "Do you know him?" Lyra forced her chin up. No. The words scraped out, raw and defiant, though her heart thundered like a drum. She had never seen the rival Alpha before. And yet his claim felt heavier than words. The council erupted. She's a traitor. She's their spy. Kill her now before she dooms us all. Aldrich silenced them with a snarl, his command shaking the walls. Enough. His gaze never left her face. If he claims you, I'll hear it from your lips. Tell me the truth, Lyra. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't know the truth herself. The rival Alpha grinned from below, teeth flashing white. She doesn't speak because she knows. She carries the blood of wolves stronger than you, Aldrich. Her line is older. Her bond promised. She belongs with me. The words twisted inside her chest. Her blood. Her line. Her parents' faces flashed in her memory. Their lifeless bodies the night they were taken from her. No one had ever told her why. No one had dared. Aldrich's aura flared. Shadows and flame licked at his form. She is mine, he declared, voice ablade. Step forward and I'll get you where you stand. The rival Alpha only smirked, his presence radiating cruel certainty. Slowly he lifted a hand, and around his wrist gleamed a crest of silver and black, ancient, unmistakable. Lyra's breath caught, her knees threatening to give way. That crest. She had seen it before, hanging in her childhood home, clutched in her father's hand the night he died. Her vision blurred as the truth roared in her veins like wildfire. This wasn't just an enemy. This was the man tied to the murder of her blood. Lyra's voice broke through the silence, trembling but fierce, eyes locked on the rival Alpha. That crest. It belonged to my family. The hall erupted again, but Lyra didn't hear them. The ground seemed to fall away beneath her feet. If his words were true, then her blood and her destiny were bound not only to Aldrich's throne, but to the monster who destroyed her past. In the moments that followed her declaration, Lyra felt as though the world had fractured into infinite shards of possibility. Each piece showed her a different version of reality, some where she was merely a pawn, others where she held the power to remake kingdoms. The scar on her collarbone, the one she'd carried since childhood and never quite understood, suddenly burned with significance. She remembered her mother's hands, gentle but strong, touching that mark on her shoulder. "This is your birthright, little one," her mother had whispered in the darkness. "One day the world will know your name. One day you'll understand why they fear us." Lyra had asked what name, what fear, but her mother had only smiled sadly and kissed her forehead. That was the last clear memory she had of her before everything changed, before the fires came, before the screams, before the dark. Now, standing in the great hall of Aldrich's palace, she understood that her mother hadn't been speaking in riddles. She had been offering prophecy wrapped in love. The words still hung in the air like ash. That crest. It belonged to my family. The hall fractured into uproar. Nobles shouted over one another. Wolves bared their teeth. And still the rival Alpha stood smug below as if her declaration had been scripted for him. Aldrich's aura exploded, shadows curling around his frame like claws. His voice cracked like thunder. "No one lays claim to her. She is under my protection." Protection. The rival Alpha's lips twisted into a sneer. "Or possession. You think chaining her in your dungeon makes her yours? She is mine by blood, by right, by destiny." Every syllable struck Lyra like a blow. Blood, right, destiny. The words clung to her like shackles she had never asked for. The council turned, some emboldened by the rival Alpha's declaration. If she belongs to another bloodline, she is no ally to the throne. She's a liability. She's a curse. Lyra's chest tightened. She would not be reduced to a pawn, traded like a token between Alphas. She took one step forward, chains clinking, her voice cutting through the storm like glass. "I belong to no one." The hall froze. Even the rival Alpha's smirk faltered for a heartbeat. Aldrich's eyes burned with something sharper than fire, watching her. She raised her chin, meeting the eyes of the court, of the man who had claimed her, of the king who had spared her. "You argue over my blood as if I were a prize, but I am not a prize. I fought for my freedom and I'll keep fighting whether under your banners or against them." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some scoffed, others faltered. A few, just a few, looked at her with something like respect. Aldrich stepped closer, his presence devouring the space between them. His voice dropped low for her ears alone. "Careful, little wolf. Defiance cuts both ways. You are safe because I say you are." Her jaw tightened. "Or because you need me." The rival Alpha laughed, the sound booming through the chamber. "Even she sees it, Aldrich. Your kingdom trembles, and you clutch at her like a drowning man clings to driftwood. His gaze found Lyra again, heavy with promise. When you tire of his chains, you will find me. Blood calls to blood. The words made her skin crawl, yet they ignited something in Aldrich, something dangerous. His growl shook the hall, primal and unrestrained. Leave before I rip your tongue from your throat. The rival alpha bowed mockingly, retreating with a gesture that promised this was far from over. His soldiers melted back into the shadows beyond the broken gates. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then slowly the court emptied, mutters trailing into the corridors like ghosts. Lyra was left standing in the ruined hall, chest heaving, chains cutting into her wrists. And Aldrich. Always Aldrich, watching, calculating, consuming. When the last noble was gone, he closed the distance between them. Too close. His heat pressed against her skin, his voice low, raw. You will not speak for me again before my council. Then stop treating me like a weapon you own. The air between them snapped taut with fury and something far more dangerous. His hand shot forward, not to strike but to grip her chin, forcing her eyes to his. You think you are free? Then understand this. Your freedom is bound to me. Your fate is mine to command. Her pulse thundered, her lips parting to retort. When it happened, heat seared across her collarbone, white hot, burning into her flesh. She gasped, staggering, the sensation both agony and ecstasy. Aldrich froze, eyes widening as light flared where his skin had brushed hers. A mark. His mark. The symbol of his wolf carved itself into her skin, glowing like fire before sinking deep into her blood. Her scream shattered the silence. Aldrich's grip tightened, his own voice rough with shock and something darker. It cannot be undone. You are mine. Her scream still echoed in the ruined hall. A raw, jagged sound that made even the torches tremble. The glowing imprint of a wolf burned across her collarbone, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Aldrich's hand gripped her chin, his voice a snarl dipped in disbelief. It cannot be undone, he whispered. You are mine now. Lyra ripped her face away, fury and terror twisting inside her. You had no right. Her voice cracked, but she stood tall, eyes wild with defiance. I would rather burn than carry your mark. He looked at her then, not as a king, not even as a predator, but as if something beyond his control had betrayed him. For the first time Aldrich seemed shaken. But before either could speak, the heavy doors burst open. Nobles poured in, their faces pale, voices sharp. The king has bound himself to a killer. One of the elder councilmen spat, pointing at Lyra. Her blood is tainted, cursed, another cried. You've doomed us all, Aldrich. The hall erupted into chaos. Accusations flung like daggers. Whispers of prophecy tangled with fear. The rival alpha's words lingered in the chamber, fanning the fire. Aldrich's aura flared, his voice thunderous. Silence. But they did not silence. Not this time. The council stood their ground, a rare and dangerous defiance. We followed you into blood and shadow, the eldest counselor growled. But this bond, this mark, has cursed you and by extension us all. We cannot follow a king who binds himself to a weapon. Lyra's chest tightened, her wrists aching against the chains. A weapon, always a weapon. Her gaze darted to Aldrich. He stood unmoving, shoulders squared, but the storm in his eyes betrayed him. Later, at the royal feast, a peace offering, a mask over the cracks in his rule, the hall was dressed in splendor. Golden banners, glittering chalices, 1,000 candles casting false warmth. But Lyra felt the tension coiled under every smile, every toast. She was forced to sit near him, a mark burning on her skin like an open wound, while nobles' eyes cut her like blades. Whispers hissed like snakes across the tables. Cursed, they murmured. Murderer. Curse-marked queen. As servants moved between tables with platters of roasted meats and honeyed wines, Lyra's senses heightened. The wolf inside her stirred, restless, attuned to danger in ways her human mind could not fully comprehend. She had learned long ago that survival depended on perceiving threats before they manifested, on smelling death before it arrived. The poison came first as the faintest scent, a bitter metallic tang that most humans would never detect, hidden beneath the richness of wine and spices. Then as Aldrich raised his goblet, Lyra's pulse spiked. The faintest bitter scent curled toward her nose, sharp and metallic. Her stomach dropped. Wolf's bane, disguised, faint but deadly. Her eyes snapped to the goblet in his hand. The poison glinted in the wine, invisible to all but her. Aldrich, she started, her voice low, desperate. But it was too late. He drank. For a heartbeat, silence. Then his hand shook, his face tightened, color draining from his skin. The goblet clattered against the table as his body shuddered. The hall erupted into screams as the king staggered, his eyes locking onto hers, fury, pain, and something softer flickering in the storm. Lyra shot to her feet, chains rattling. She knew this toxin. She had smelled it before, bled from it before, and she knew one horrifying truth. He's been poisoned, and I'm the only one who can save him. The feast hall descended into chaos. Nobles screamed, soldiers shoved through the crowd, and servants dropped trays in terror. But Lyra saw only one thing: Aldrich collapsing, his lips paling, his breath shuddering in his chest. "Get back!" she roared, chains dragging across the floor as she knelt by him. Her voice carried the weight of a storm. And for the first time they obeyed. His hand shot up, gripping her wrist. Even weakened, the pressure was iron. His eyes burned into hers, glazed yet defiant. "Don't show them weakness." She pressed a hand against his chest. His heartbeat faltered, stuttering like a dying flame. "If I don't, you'll be gone in minutes." The council shouted for physicians, priests, warriors. But Lyra knew better. She had smelled this poison before, long ago on the blade that had once cut into her own flesh. Wolf's bane, yes, but laced with something older, something unnatural. She bent low, her lips brushing his ear. "I need you alive, King. Don't fight me now." With the council distracted in their frenzy, she hauled him up with a strength no one expected and slipped into the shadows of the palace. Few dared follow. The sight of the cursed Omega carrying their poisoned king struck them mute with fear. In the silence of the stone corridors, Aldrich's weight dragged heavier, his breaths ragged. Lyra's muscles burned as she supported him, moving through passages she didn't know existed, guided by something instinctive, something that seemed to remember the layout of this ancient fortress. At last she pushed open a door tucked behind a crumbling arch, a hidden stair spiraling down. "The dungeons?" he rasped. "Not dungeons," she whispered. "A place even your council fears." At the bottom an old iron gate groaned open. The air reeked of herbs and ashes, and there, hunched over a fire, sat a woman cloaked in shadow, eyes like glass beads flicked up. "You shouldn't have come here, little wolf," the healer hissed. "And you bring the king bleeding death bold." Lyra ignored the bite in her tone. "You're the only one who can strip this poison." The healer leaned close, pressing bony fingers to Aldrich's skin, sniffing the fading pulse. Her grin split wide, sharp. "Not wolf's bane alone. This venom was crafted, twisted with rune magic. Whoever brewed it wanted not his death, but yours." Lyra froze. "What?" The healer's eyes gleamed with cruel delight. "The poison is key to your bloodline. His suffering is collateral. The true target is you." Her heart slammed in her chest. The council's revolt, the rival alpha's claim, Aldrich's sudden poisoning. It all sharpened into a horrifying truth. Lyra's blood ran cold as the healer whispered, "They don't want to kill him. They want to use you. And you've already stepped into their snare." Before she could demand answers, before Aldrich could even draw another breath, the walls of the chamber exploded inward. Smoke and steel swallowed the air. Black-cloaked wolves surged through the opening, their snarls vibrating the stone. "Rival pack." Lyra hissed, instinctively shoving Aldrich behind her, though he could barely stand. Her chains rattled as she tore one free, swinging it like a blade. The first wolf lunged. She split his skull against the wall. The second fell beneath her kick, but there were too many. A dart whistled past her cheek. Fire lanced through her veins as the drug spread, heavier than wolf's bane, bending her limbs into weakness. Her last sight before darkness claimed her was Aldrich collapsing, reaching for her with blood-stained fingers. When Lyra woke, iron shackles bound her wrists, the cold biting deeper than winter. She lay on rough stone, the scent of moss and old blood choking the air. The torches that flickered on the walls painted the prison in shadows too thick for comfort. "Awake, little wolf." The voice coiled like smoke through the cell. Out of the darkness stepped a man draped in black furs, his presence swallowing the space. His eyes glowed a cold amber, sharp with cruelty and hunger. The rival alpha, Kaelin. Lyra forced herself to sit, chains groaning. "If you came for my head, you should have killed me in the palace." Kaelin's grin curved like a knife. "No, Lyra, I did not come for your head. I came for what runs in your veins." He circled her slowly, the way a predator might circle prey already caught. "Half royal, half outcast. That is what you are, isn't it? They thought burning your family from history would erase the prophecy. But blood never lies." Her chest constricted. Memories she had fought to bury clawed their way back. Her parents' faces, the night screams filled the valley. the family crest taken from her father's still body. She spat at his feet. You know nothing of me. Oh, I know enough. His hand snapped forward, catching her chin, forcing her gaze to his. The world of kings and councils is dying. And you, Lyra, are the key. With you, the chains of thrones will break. With you, we end them all. His lips brushed her ear as he whispered, words colder than steel. You are the key to ending all kings. Kaelin's words hung over Lyra like chains. You are the key to ending all kings. She tried to jerk free of his grip, but his fingers tightened, bruising her jaw. His eyes burned with dangerous certainty as though he saw truths she hadn't dared to name. Before she could retort, the ground trembled. Shouts tore through the camp, savage and panicked. Steel clashed. Screams rose. And then the first body hit the ground outside her cell. Kaelin's grin faltered. The iron door shuddered on its hinges before exploding inward. A wolf, massive and white with streaks of crimson, filled the frame, eyes like burning silver. When it stepped into the light, fur shifted to flesh and Aldrich, the Alpha King, emerged, bare-chested, drenched in blood, his blade dripping. He had come for her. Step away from her. His voice was low, lethal. Kaelin chuckled, unfazed. Ah, the mighty king. You tear through my men like a storm, but you cannot tear out fate. His gaze flicked to Lyra. Tell him, little wolf. Tell him what you are. Lyra's chest constricted. Her tongue felt like stone. Aldrich's blade tilted. The point aimed at Kaelin's throat. If you breathe near her again, I'll bury your pack with you. Kaelin only smirked. Then bury us. But when the truth comes out, when her blood burns through your throne, remember I warned you. He snapped his fingers. Shadows burst from the walls, his men dragging him back into the dark tunnels. By the time Aldrich lunged, Kaelin was gone, his mocking laughter echoing long after. The silence that followed was heavier than any battle cry. Aldrich turned, silver eyes pinning Lyra. Blood painted his chest, his hands, even his throat. But it was his expression that struck terror into her bones. Fury, betrayal, confusion. He broke the shackles from her wrists as though they were twigs, but instead of softening, he gripped her arms tight. What did he mean? His voice cracked like thunder. Why did he speak of your blood? Why would he claim you're the key to the end of kings? Lyra's lips trembled. She tried to turn away, but his hand caught her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. For the first time she saw something in him beyond control. A fear so raw it burned hotter than rage. Don't you dare lie to me. His voice lowered, dangerous, intimate. What are you, Lyra? His words were not a question, but a demand that rattled the walls between them, and she had no answer that could save her. Aldrich's grip was iron on her chin, his silver gaze tearing through her like claws. What are you, Lyra? His voice was low but lethal, heavy enough to steal the very air around them. Her throat burned with the truth she could not speak. Kaelin's words pulsed inside her skull like poison. You are the key to ending all kings. Her body trembled, not from fear of Aldrich, but of the knowledge she carried, the secret too jagged to confess. If she told him everything, if she told him the prophecy, he would see her not as his mate, but as the weapon destined to destroy him. I'm nothing, she whispered, forcing strength into her words. At least nothing that could threaten you. Kaelin twists lies. He always has. He wanted you to doubt me. Aldrich's eyes narrowed, the predator inside him pacing. His fingers dug into her arms as if testing whether she was still solid, still his. Half of me wants to believe you, he muttered. The other half sees shadows every time you withhold your truth. Tears stung her eyes, but she swallowed them back. If I were a danger to you, would I be here? Would I have fought for your life? Risked my own over and over? The words cut through the silence like steel against stone. His jaw clenched, torn between fury and something deeper, something fragile. Slowly his grip softened. His forehead leaned against hers, breath hot, ragged. You make me doubt everything I know, he confessed. But I cannot. I will not lose you. Her chest ached. She reached up, brushing blood from his cheek, tracing the scar there. Then trust what you feel, she said softly. For a fleeting moment he did. His hand slipped to her waist, pulling her against him, his lips pressing to hers in a kiss more desperate than tender, like a man clinging to the edge of a cliff. The bond between them pulsed, the wolf mark on her skin burning faintly, not with pain but with fierce belonging. Yet beneath that heat, guilt festered. She had told him part of the truth but not all. She had hidden the prophecy carved into her very blood. The shadow coiled within her veins. Beautiful listener, if Lyra's defiance has set your very soul ablaze, if you've trembled with her through every revelation and felt the earth-shattering power of a bond that transcends kingdoms, then I implore you, subscribe now because what comes next will tear the world apart. Tonight, darkness rises from within her own blood. A shadow stirs that she cannot control, a power that whispers hunger and destruction. She will stand at the precipice between salvation and annihilation, between the man she's come to love and the destiny that demands his destruction. The prophecy will speak its truth and blood will answer blood. The final battle is gathering on the horizon, a convergence of fate, prophecy, and forbidden love that will determine not just Lyra's destiny, but the future of every wolf in existence. Kings will fall. Thrones will crumble. And one girl, marked by both shadow and light, must choose between the crown she never wanted and the man she cannot bear to lose. Subscribe now and walk with us into the maelstrom. The revelation that changes everything is seconds away, and you absolutely cannot miss what happens when destiny comes knocking at midnight. That night, the weight of her half-truths followed her into sleep. The dream began in silence, but it was not peace. The moon above bled black, dripping shadows that slid over her skin like chains. A voice hissed through the dark. You are the key. Break him. End him. Take what is yours. Her body convulsed. Her wolf stirred, but it was not her wolf she knew. It was something darker, sharper, gnashing to be free. The shadows coiled around her hands. In the dream she reached for Aldrich, her king, her mate. And the vision twisted until she saw him broken beneath her claws, his silver eyes glassy, his blood staining her lips. No. Lyra jolted, but her body moved without her. In the waking world, her hands hovered inches above Aldrich's throat, claws half-formed, glowing faintly with an unnatural black fire. Her wolf mark seared her skin, burning hotter than ever before. Aldrich stirred, the faintest sound rumbling in his chest. He opened his eyes and froze. Lyra. His voice was hoarse, caught between shock and a warning growl. Her eyes widened as she realized what she was doing, what she might have done. She yanked her hands back, chest heaving, horror clawing through her. The shadow still pulsed in her veins, whispering hunger. Aldrich stared at her as though seeing her for the first time, not as his salvation but as his doom. Aldrich's silver eyes were shards of moonlight fixed on her trembling claws. The air between them was thick, almost suffocating, his chest rising and falling with the low rumble of a growl he fought to contain. Lyra staggered back, hands shaking, horror coursing through her veins. I didn't mean. His voice was raw, husky with restrained fury. You were a breath away from tearing out my throat. No, she whispered, gripping her temples as if to claw the shadows from her mind. It wasn't me. Something inside me, something I can't control. Aldrich rose from the bed, looming over her, every muscle taut, his presence heavier than steel. Do not ask me to believe in phantoms when I felt your claws, Lyra. Whatever darkness you carry, it is real. Her heart pounded as tears blurred her sight. She wanted to scream the truth, the prophecy, the curse that had been whispered in her blood since birth. But fear caged her tongue. If she spoke it aloud, there would be no undoing it. A pounding crash split the chamber door open. Armed guards flooded in, spears glinting in the torchlight, their eyes sharp with dread. Behind them, robed counselors emerged like circling birds, faces carved in stone. There, one spat, pointing to her shaking form. The Omega, marked by shadow, the cursed one. Aldrich's head snapped toward them, his growl rising. You dare break into my chambers? You dare keep a prophecy hidden from your people? The eldest counselor interrupted, voice ringing like a gavel. He held up a scroll, parchment brittle and stained with age. The prophecy of the marked Omega passed down through bloodlines long before your reign. Lyra's knees weakened as the words were spoken aloud. The guard surged forward, seizing her arms despite her thrashing. Release her, Aldrich roared, stepping forward with his wolf flaring beneath his skin. The chamber shook with his power, but the counselor's words froze even him. The prophecy states, the marked Omega shall either unite the clans beneath one crown or tear them apart in rivers of blood. She is salvation or annihilation. The counselor's gaze cut to Lyra. And tonight she nearly murdered her own king in his sleep. The darkness within her confirms it. No, Lyra cried, her voice cracking. That's not what happened. Silence. Another counselor hissed. You were born to end kings. We cannot risk letting you end ours. Aldrich's claws lengthened, his aura suffocating, but the council had already prepared their blade. Soldiers filled the corridor beyond the chamber, the sheer weight of opposition pressing like a noose around his throat. By law and by prophecy she must be executed publicly, the elder declared, his voice echoing like a death knell. Before the clans see your weakness, before she fulfills the darker path of her destiny. Lyra's breath hitched, fear and fury tangling inside her. You don't understand. I fought to protect this kingdom. Fought for him. Her eyes found Aldrich's, desperate pleading. You know me, Aldrich. You feel me? Don't let them take me like this. But Aldrich stood torn, silver eyes flickering between mate and throne. His kingdom, his crown, his bond. One wrong choice and he risked everything. The guards dragged her forward, binding her wrists in chains laced with wolf's bane. The stench burned her skin, sending waves of weakness through her limbs. Her wolf whimpered within, caged and powerless. Tomorrow at dawn, the elder intoned, the cursed Omega will die, her blood sealing the prophecy before it consumes her further. Lyra's scream ripped the air, raw and unyielding. Aldrich. He flinched, the sound carving into him, yet he did not move. Not yet. His eyes locked on her, filled with rage at the council, at himself, at the prophecy that now shackled them both. Her chains rattled as they dragged her toward the shadows. Her gaze never left his. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her voice was a blade. If you let them kill me, Aldrich, you'll be killing your own fate. The doors slammed shut, leaving him in suffocating silence. His fists curled, blood dripping from his palms where his claws dug in. The counselor's eyes gleamed with triumph as they lingered in the room, waiting for his verdict. The elder counselor bowed, his words sharp as the blade at Lyra's throat. Decide, your majesty. Will you execute her publicly and uphold the prophecy, or defy it and doom us all? Aldrich stood frozen, caught between crown and bond, salvation and ruin. The chamber stank of wolf's bane and politics. Aldrich's knuckles dripped red where his claws had pierced his palms. Yet he hadn't moved since Lyra was dragged from the room. Her scream still echoed against his ribs, a wound no blade could match. Your Majesty, the elder counselor's tone was patient, but his eyes gleamed with venom. The clans demand stability. Execute the Omega at dawn, and their fears will be soothed. Aldrich's gaze snapped to him, silver eyes burning. You call slaughter stability. She is prophecy incarnate, the counselor pressed. Do you truly mean to gamble your throne and all our lives on a cursed bond? The word bond struck like a lash. His wolf snarled inside, aching for Lyra, for the scent of her, for the heat of her touch. But the crown sat like chains across his shoulders, and every eye in the council chamber waited for his answer. At last his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You mistake me for a man who bows to fear. The council shifted uneasily. The elder sneered. Then you choose defiance. Very well. But understand, my king, defiance breeds rebellion. By morning the news spread like wildfire. The Alpha King refused to kill the marked Omega. His defiance tore through the clans like a blade through silk. In the rival territories banners rose. The rival Alpha, Darius, stood before a mass of warriors. His voice carrying over drums of war. She is ours. She is the key foretold to end kings and birth a new era. Aldrich hides her because he fears the truth. We will march to his gates and the prophecy will belong to us. The armies howled, steel and claws raised high. War was no longer rumor. It was inevitable. Back in the stone corridors of his palace, Aldrich moved like a shadow. Every counselor who dared cross his path felt the weight of his silence. A king who had chosen his wolf over their law. He summoned only those he trusted. His most loyal general, a handful of warriors and one scarred old seer. She is the fulcrum, the seer rasped, her blind eyes gleaming faintly. Kill her and the prophecy tilts toward ruin. Save her and it tilts toward blood. The path is not written yet. Aldrich leaned close, voice sharpened. Then I will carve it myself. But even as he plotted, whispers spread. The council sought to move Lyra before dawn, delivering her in secret to the rival Alpha as a peace offering. Betrayal coiled around his throne like smoke. He would not allow it. Night fell heavy. The palace cloaked in silence. Aldrich slipped through hidden corridors known only to kings, his silver eyes glowing faintly as he descended toward the dungeons. Guards lay unconscious in his wake, felled by swift, merciless strikes. Lyra's scent pulled him onward. Wolf, ash and wild rain. He clenched his fists to keep from breaking the world open just to reach her. But before he reached the last gate, a cry of alarm echoed from deeper within the prison. A clamor of steel, a rush of feet. Chains snapped. A cloaked figure emerged from the shadows. Guards cut down behind him like fallen stalks of wheat. His hood fell back, revealing the gaunt, sharp-eyed prisoner Lyra had met before. The one who had spoken her forgotten name. He moved like a storm unchained, his smile sharp as a blade when his gaze found Aldrich. "You've been busy, King," he drawled, stepping past the fallen guards. "But you're not the only one who wants her fate in his hands." Aldrich's wolf snarled, instincts flaring. "You." The prisoner tilted his head, eyes glinting with secrets too heavy for one man to bear. "You cling to half-truths and fragments, Aldrich. But I hold the rest of her story. The truth that will break her or bind her." His voice dropped into a vow. "And now I'm free." The prisoner vanished into the maze of corridors, his laughter trailing like smoke. Aldrich stood frozen, torn between chasing him or reaching Lyra, because whichever he chose, the war for her truth had already begun. The sound of chains rattling haunted Lyra's every breath. Her cell was a tomb of cold stone and iron, the air heavy with wolf's bane that burned her lungs and numbed her wolf. Dawn loomed closer with every heartbeat, each hour sliding past like a blade against her throat. She curled on the narrow cot, but there was no rest. Not with the prophecy echoing in her skull. The marked Omega will unite or destroy the wolf clans, a curse and a crown wrapped in the same skin. And now, because of her, Aldrich's throne trembled. The council's whispers slithered through the dungeon walls. She had overheard them. "The king has grown weak. She will be his ruin. By dawn, her head must fall." Lyra clenched her fists until her nails drew blood. Rage battled despair inside her chest. She had fought armies, slaughtered men twice her size, clawed her way out of blood and snow. But here, caged and waiting for execution, she felt powerless except for the bond. It pulsed beneath her skin like fire. Every beat tethered to Aldrich. Even locked in separate chambers of stone and crown, she felt his struggle. His wolf clawed inside him, restless. His fury pressed against her bones as if they shared the same cage. And beneath it all, his ache for her burned hotter than any poison. Her lips trembled. "Damn you, Aldrich," she whispered to the dark. "Damn you for making me need you." When the guards brought her water, she barely lifted her head. But then her breath caught because it wasn't water they carried. It was him. Aldrich stepped into the cell, his cloak shadowing his face, but his eyes gleamed silver bright in the dark. He dismissed the guards with a growl, their protests silenced by his authority. The door slammed shut, chains rattled between them. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Lyra whispered, though her voice cracked. "And deny my wolf the only thing it's ever craved." His words were low, dangerous. He moved closer and even in chains, her wolf surged toward him. "Don't," she hissed, trying to press herself against the wall, but her body betrayed her. The bond dragged her forward, each heartbeat sinking with his. "You think I don't feel it?" he demanded, voice ragged. "Every breath you take is mine. Every scar you bear I feel in my own flesh. You think I can let you die at dawn? I'd tear the world apart first." The walls of her resistance cracked. All the nights of fear, the days of defiance, the endless ache of loneliness shattered beneath the weight of his presence. Her lips parted. "If I give in to this bond, Aldrich, there will be no turning back." His claws grazed her shackled wrists, careful not to cut. "Then don't turn back." The kiss was inevitable, fierce, starved. When her lips met his, the bond ignited, a detonation of light and shadow exploding between them. Wolf's bane burned away like smoke. The stone walls groaned and cracked. Torches blew out in a rush of violent wind. Power surged through her veins, a storm neither of them understood. Fire and fury, darkness and light colliding until the very palace shook. Chains shattered. The dungeon walls split. Above them, the council chamber trembled as though the gods themselves had descended in wrath. When they finally tore apart, both gasped for breath, their foreheads pressed together, silver fire glowing in their veins. "What did we just do?" Lyra whispered, terrified and awed. Aldrich's answer was lost as the floor above them cracked open, daylight spilling into the dungeon. The palace itself was breaking. Their kiss had unleashed a storm so violent it shattered the palace walls, and now the entire kingdom would know. Nothing could contain them anymore. The roar of crumbling stone drowned out the world. Lyra staggered back, Aldrich's arm gripping her as the dungeon split open, and daylight cascaded down like a judgment. Dust choked the air. Screams echoed from above. And the palace, once a fortress of unshakable power, now trembled as if bowing to them. Their kiss had broken more than chains. It had broken the throne itself. Council members rushed into the courtyard above, panic twisting their faces. Some shouted to execute her at once, others begged the gods for mercy, but their words fell into chaos as cracks spread through marble floors and iron pillars. The prophecy, one counselor shrieked. She's awakened it. The Omega Doom. Lyra felt their hatred like daggers, but worse was the awe, the kind that feared her more than death itself. Aldrich bared his fangs. Any who touch her die. His voice carried across the hall like a thunderclap, silencing some but not all. For every noble who bowed, another turned to betrayal, slipping daggers from robes, whispering allegiance to powers beyond him. And then the horns sounded, long, low, mournful, the call of war. From the shattered walls, Lyra saw them. An ocean of wolves marching on the palace. The rival Alpha's banners bled crimson in the sunlight. His armies had been waiting, watching, and now the weakness was laid bare. The council's revolt and the palace's fall had given him the perfect opening. Aldrich snarled, calling his warriors to arms. Blades clashed. Howls tore the air. The courtyard became a battlefield in heartbeats, loyalty fracturing like glass. Lyra's heart pounded. Her wolf howled inside her, half light, half shadow, begging for release. She tore weapons from fallen hands, fighting beside Aldrich, their movements a brutal dance of survival. But for every soldier they cut down, 10 more pressed in. Then she saw him. The rival Alpha striding through the carnage like death-given flesh. His armor gleamed with fresh blood. His eyes sharp as knives locked onto hers across the chaos. Lyra. His voice carried booming, not with hate but with something deeper. Recognition. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. She lifted her blade, spitting blood from her lips. Come closer and I'll finish what I started the night your men came for me. He smiled, cruel and knowing, and stepped forward until the clash of soldiers became a blur around them. You don't even know, do you? His words curled around her like poison. Why the king kept you alive. Why your name was erased from history. Why I have hunted you all this time. Her grip tightened on her sword, every muscle straining. Say it. He leaned close enough that she felt his breath through the blood and smoke. His next words were a blade through her soul. Because I am your blood, Lyra. Your brother. The battlefield halted in a heartbeat as his revelation shattered everything Lyra thought she knew. Enemy, hunter, rival, and now blood. Brother. It echoed in her skull, louder than the clash of steel, louder than the screams around them, louder even than her own heartbeat. She staggered back, sword shaking in her hand. No. Her voice cracked as if the truth itself could shatter her bones. You lie. The rival Alpha, her supposed brother, smirked, eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. You feel it, don't you? The blood howls. You and I are bound not by prophecy but by birth. Aldrich's growl split the air like thunder. He stepped between them, his sword raised, eyes burning with primal fury. You dare. His voice was ragged, half man, half wolf. You dare touch her with your poison? The rival Alpha only laughed. Poor king. You think she's yours? She was never meant to kneel at your side. She was born of my bloodline, and by prophecy she belongs to me. Lyra's chest heaved, her lungs fighting for air. Her wolf raged inside her, torn between the pull of the bond with Aldrich and the sick, undeniable thrum that came with the word brother. She dropped her sword, palms pressing to her temples as the world tilted. Images flashed unbidden. Half-formed memories, shadows of a woman's lullaby, hands that carried her through fire, a voice whispering her name in the dark. Her knees buckled. Aldrich caught her before she hit the ground. His body shielded hers as arrows rained down from the battlements. His warmth steadied her, anchoring her against the storm inside. Look at me, he growled, pressing his forehead to hers. Whatever lies he speaks, you are mine, my mate. Nothing else matters. But before she could answer, before she could even breathe, the rival Alpha roared and his armies surged. The battlefield erupted. Wolves clashed in a frenzy of teeth and steel. The council's traitors, smelling blood, threw open the gates to the enemy. The palace courtyard became a slaughterhouse. The marble floor slick with gore. Aldrich fought like a beast unchained. Every strike a storm. Every roar shaking the very earth. Lyra fought too, her wolf burning with power she didn't understand. Her claws cutting down enemies with terrifying ease. But even together they were drowning. Through the chaos, the rival Alpha stalked closer, never breaking her gaze. He wasn't just here to win. He was here to claim. Lyra's choice pressed on her chest like a blade. Blood or bond, brother or mate. Which part of herself would she betray? Then a scream tore the night. She turned just in time to see the rival Alpha's spear flash through the chaos. It sliced across Aldrich's side, cutting through armor, tearing flesh. No. The king staggered, blood pouring from the wound. But still he stood tall. Still he shielded her. Still he fought. His sword cut down 2 soldiers. 3. But the 4th drove him to his knees. Lyra's world stopped. She dropped beside him, catching his collapsing weight. Her hands pressing against the gash that refused to close. His blood soaked her fingers, hot and relentless. "Stay with me," she begged, her tears streaking down her dirt-stained cheeks. "You don't get to leave me. Not now. Not ever." The rival Alpha watched with a cruel smile, lowering his spear as if savoring her despair. Aldrich's hand, slick with blood, rose to her face. His touch was trembling but tender, his thumb brushing her cheek as though memorizing her one last time. "Lyra." His voice was ragged, broken, fading. "Listen to me. No, don't you dare. You were never meant." He coughed, crimson spilling from his lips, his eyes locked on hers, fierce even in their dimming light. "Never meant to serve me." Her heart cracked open as the weight of his words sank in. "You were meant to rule." Lyra's sobs echoed as Aldrich collapsed in her arms, his final words burning through the battlefield chaos. The king's life bleeds away, leaving her torn between grief, destiny, and the shadow of her so-called brother who still stands waiting. The battlefield froze. Lyra's scream split the night as Aldrich's body sagged in her arms. His blood soaking into her torn dress, his last words ringing inside her like a curse and a crown all at once. "You were meant to rule." "No." Her voice broke, sharp with denial. She pressed her palms desperately to the wound in his side, willing her wolf to heal him, pouring everything she had into him. Her bond, her strength, her soul. But his mark, still burning faintly on her skin, was fading. "Aldrich, fight," she begged, her tears staining his face. "You're the Alpha King. You don't get to leave me. You don't." But his chest stilled beneath her touch. Her world shattered. The rival Alpha's laughter rang out, cruel and merciless, cutting through the silence. He stepped forward, spear gleaming with the king's blood. "Do you see it now, sister?" He sneered. "The bond is chains. Love is weakness. You were born to rise above all of them. By blood, by prophecy, by fire." Lyra lifted her gaze, her face pale, her eyes wild with grief. Something inside her broke. Something inside her woke. The mark Aldrich had given her seared her skin, not fading but transforming. Its glow bled outward like wildfire. Her body trembled, not with weakness but with a terrible rising power. Her wolf roared within, no longer caged, no longer small. The air shifted. The ground itself seemed to bow. All around them, soldiers dropped their weapons, stumbling back in awe and terror as wind and lightning twisted around her. Lyra rose slowly, Aldrich's body slipping from her arms, her hair whipping like a banner in the storm. Her voice was no longer broken. It was thunder. "You call me sister, you call me weak." She lifted her hand, sparks of raw magic coiling from her fingertips. "But I am prophecy made flesh. I am bond and blood. And I will end you." The rival Alpha lunged. Their clash was cataclysmic. Steel met storm, spear met claw. Every strike shook the battlefield, sending soldiers scattering, shattering stone beneath their feet. He fought with the rage of a bloodline betrayed. She fought with grief sharpened into fury. Every blow carried Aldrich's mark, every strike answering his final command. Oh. Her brother's taunts only fed the fire. "You were mine to command." "No," she snarled, her voice like breaking glass. "I am no one's to command." His spear sliced her shoulder, but she did not falter. Her claws tore through his armor, her wolf's howl splitting the night. At last, as lightning burst from the sky itself, she drove him to his knees. His spear clattered to the ground, his eyes so like hers glared up in fury and despair. "Then prophecy has damned us all," he spat. Lyra's chest heaved, her claws trembling inches from his throat. For a heartbeat, her wolf hesitated. Brother blood. The fragments of memory whispered in her ears like ghosts. But then her gaze fell to Aldrich's still form, lying broken in the blood-soaked dirt. Her grief hardened into resolve. "For him," she whispered. "For me. For every Omega who was ever silenced." Her claws slashed. The rival Alpha's body crumpled. Lifeless. Silence fell. The storm eased, but its power lingered around her, swirling like a crown of shadow and light. All eyes turned to her. The armies, the council, even her enemies. Some fell to their knees. Others lowered their heads in awe. Lyra stood tall, bloodied but unbroken. Aldrich's fading mark glowing upon her skin like a coronation. Not servant, not outcast, not even mate. Queen. But as Lyra stood victorious over the fallen body of her brother, something extraordinary happened. Aldrich's mark, burned upon her collarbone, blazed with light so brilliant it rivaled the sun. She felt it then, a pull ancient and primal drawing her back toward him. She turned, falling to her knees at his side, and placed her hands upon his wound. The mark spread from her skin to his, weaving threads of silver and gold through his body. Power flowed through her, not the destructive force that had consumed her moments before, but something pure, something that spoke of healing and renewal. His eyes fluttered open. Gasping, he pulled her against him, his fingers digging into her back as though ensuring she was real, that she still existed in this world. "You live," he breathed against her hair. "My heart, you live." The armies witnessed it, the resurrection of their king, the ascension of their queen. It was the final proof they needed that destiny had chosen her, that whatever prophecy had spoken, it had chosen not destruction but transformation. Days later, in the grand hall rebuilt from ruin, Lyra sat upon the throne. Not beside it, not beneath it, but upon it. The banners of every clan hung above, not in division but in unity. The council that had once plotted her death now knelt before her, cowed and sworn. The armies that had once sought her chains now followed her command. Her crown was not forged of gold, but of survival, of blood, of power earned through fire and sacrifice. The prophecy was fulfilled. The first Omega Queen had risen. Lyra sat upon the throne, her gaze unflinching, her voice carrying across the silent hall. At her side stood Aldrich, healed but changed, no longer the sole ruler but a king reborn through love and sacrifice. "The age of kings is over," she declared, her words echoing through the stone walls. "The age of the Omega Queen begins." She raised her hand and every wolf in the realm felt it, a shift in the very fabric of their world. The hierarchy that had bound them for centuries crumbled. New laws would be written. No. Blood would rule. And those who had been lowest would rise to stand beside those who had been highest. Aldrich took her hand, pressing it to his heart, and the crowd erupted in a roar that shook the heavens. The future lay before them, uncertain but radiant with possibility. Prophecy had not destroyed them, it had transformed them. And in the eyes of the Omega Queen, as she gazed out upon her kingdom, burned the fire of 1,000 suns. She rose from her throne and descended the steps, taking her place not above her people but among them. She walked through the halls of the palace, now a home rather than a fortress, and everywhere she went, wolves bowed not in fear but in honor. The dungeons were emptied. The chains were melted down and forged into monuments celebrating freedom. The dungeons themselves were transformed into halls of learning, where the history of wolves would be rewritten, not by the victors but by all those whose voices had been silenced. In the great libraries, scrolls were uncovered that told the true story of Lyra's bloodline. She was not the product of prophecy alone, but of a long line of strong women who had been erased from history because they threatened the power structure of the old world. Her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother, all had carried the same mark, the same power, the same untapped potential. With each revelation, Lyra understood herself more fully. She was not a weapon forged by destiny. She was the culmination of generations of sacrifice and strength. She was the answer to a prayer whispered across centuries. Aldrich stood beside her through it all, no longer the sole voice of authority but her equal in power and wisdom. Together they crafted new laws, laws that protected the weak, honored the strong and created opportunities for those who had been deemed lesser. The rival clans that had marched on Aldrich's fortress were not conquered but invited into the new order. Some came willingly, understanding that the age of dominance and hierarchy was ending. Others fought, but they were met not with the cruelty of the old regime but with a mercy that was far more powerful than any blade. Lyra showed them that power did not require the subjugation of others. Strength did not demand weakness in those beneath you. And love, true unbreakable love, was the greatest weapon any realm could wield. Moons passed, then seasons. The palace that had been shattered was rebuilt not as a fortress of stone and steel, but as a symbol of unity. Wolves from all clans worked side by side. Old enemies shared tables. Former enemies became friends. On a night when the moon hung full and bright, Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking her kingdom. Aldrich joined her, wrapping his arms around her, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "All of this? The crown, the responsibility?" Lyra leaned back into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her back. "No," she said without hesitation. "I was born for this. Not because of prophecy or destiny carved into my bones, but because I chose it. Every single day I choose this." He turned her in his arms, lifting her chin so her eyes met his. "I chose you too," he said. "The moment I saw you in that throne room, bloodied and defiant. I knew you were meant to be more than you were being treated as. I just didn't know you were meant to be this." She smiled, the expression transforming her entire face. "Neither did I. But I'm glad we figured it out together." As they kissed beneath the full moon, the wolves of their kingdom howled in celebration. It was not a cry of war or dominance, but a song of unity, of hope, of a new beginning that had been won not through prophecy or destiny, but through love, sacrifice, and the unwavering strength of a girl who had refused to be anything less than free. The age of the Omega Queen had truly begun. Dear listeners, thank you for joining Lyra on this extraordinary journey. From servant to queen, from chains to crown, her story reminds us that destiny is not something we are bound to, it is something we create with every choice we make, every line we refuse to cross, and every love we dare to claim. May her strength inspire you. May her courage light your path. Subscribe for more tales of wolves and queens, of prophecy and transformation, of love that transcends all boundaries.